Alright, you guys, today we are making these spathes for our miniature daffodils. The spathe is a little protective covering that goes over the bud until the bud is ready to emerge and then eventually to bloom. It's not quite the same thing as a sepal. It's a little bit further down the stem. Let me show you where on the daffodil. The spathe is this little part back here on the back of the stem. Now, as the spathe actually, it starts out a very pale green, and then as it ages, it dries out and turns into this light golden brown color. And I chose to go with the golden brown for mine just because my stem was already green and I kind of wanted a different color in my arrangement. So I went with a light brown for mine. I am using two different colors of beads. I'm using a transparent matte light topaz and then a transparent light topaz. They're technically the same color, but one is in a matte finish. And I find that matte beads are typically a little bit lighter in shade than the same color in a regular transparent. Now, I chose these colors because I just wanted a very subtle color change. I didn't want anything that was going to be too striking or dramatic. Just kind of the hint of a wrinkle or the hint of a little bit of texture inside this little spathe that we're making. But if you do want something that's a little bit more striking, you could use maybe like a transparent light topaz with a transparent regular topaz, which is a little bit darker color. That'll give you a little bit more variation color if you want that. I'm also going to talk about a different shading pattern at the end that you could also do. All right, now as we go further into the art of French beading, I kind of wanted to start introducing some shading patterns that you can do. And I wanted to start with this one because this one is fairly simple. Normally with French beading, you won't pre-string your beads when you're working with more than one color, just because you may use a different length of beads for each row than the designer does. That just goes to personal technique. It's not really anything that anybody has done wrong or incorrectly. That's just the way it works. Our hands work differently. So you may end up using a different number of beads than the designer. And if you've pre-strung the same amount as the designer used, your beads might just fall in unwanted places. However, with this technique that I'm going to be showing you guys, we kind of don't care where the beads fall. We want just kind of a random streaking pattern throughout our piece. And so for this one, you can pre-string your beads. For this shading technique, you can load your beads onto the wire. And specifically, I have loaded them in an alternating pattern. I did about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of the first color, and then somewhere near the same length of the second color. Now you don't really need to measure it. I just eyeballed it because, again, it's really not that big of a deal. All right, we're going to be working with the basic frame technique, and we're also going to be reverse wrapping. So let's go ahead and get our frame set up. We will need about a 1/2 inch of beads for the basic row. Let me scoot in a little bit closer now. All right, we need a 1/2 inch of beads for our basic row, and we're only going to be wrapping 9 rows, so we don't need our top wire to be very long. And we also don't need our bottom wire to be very long. So we're just going to fold a little bit of the bare wire below over across in front of the basic row. Grab and hold the basic row and the working wire. And then we're going to twist the 2 wires below to make a little loop. Straighten out your frame. All right, so my working wire is attached to my spool. And I am going to assume that you have at least some familiarity with the basic frame technique here. If not, I'll put a link to my video tutorial for the basic frame down below. All right, so I'm going to push my beads all the way down against the bottom wire, and then I'm going to fold up to the top wire. Now this is where we're going to be reverse wrapping. We're going to reverse wrap at the top wire. We want a pointed top, pointed bottom, and we want 9 total rows. All right, so to reverse wrap, we're basically going to be wrapping backwards. Normally, we would cross over the front and wrap that way. But with a reverse wrap, we're actually going to go over the back. We're going to go over the back. We want a pointed top, so we're going to do a 45-degree angle. And I know this is going to feel weird when we do it, but we're going to be wrapping. It's going to feel backwards. We're going to be going over the back and then wrap around the front at a 45-degree angle and then come down at a 45-degree angle backwards from the back way. All right, push beads up, and we're going to make sure they go on top of, they're actually going to be on top of the back of our top wire this time instead of the front. And we want a round bottom, so we're going to bring beads down to the bottom. And we are not going to reverse wrap the bottom wire. We're going to wrap that one normally. We want a round bottom, so we will use a 90-degree angle wrap. And then again to the top wire. Let me show you a different way to do this, just because I know that feels weird. This other way is still going to feel weird, but it might be a little less weird. Try both, see which one works best for you. So wrap up to that top wire. And instead of, I'm looking at this is the front of the spathe. Instead of looking at the front and wrapping backwards, I can actually flip it over. That way I'm looking at what appears to be the front of the top wire instead of the back side of it. And then I still kind of have to wrap backwards because it's the opposite direction that I would normally wrap. But I can wrap at a point, looking at what feels like the front, but is actually the back. All right, now you got to remember to flip it back over when you do the bottom, because we want that wrap to be on the same side for each row that's on that top or bottom wire. So make sure you flip it back over to do the bottom wire wrap. All right, let me show the first way again. Cross over the back, 45-degree angle, measure out your beads around the front to the back again, and down at a 45-degree angle. Push beads up, make sure they're on top of that top wire so that you can hide it all the way. And then rotate and wrap at the bottom wire. All right, let me show the second way again. We need 2 more rows. Or you can flip and then wrap at the top wire. And then flip again and then wrap at the bottom wire. All right, now that we've finished the last row, we're going to tie off our working wire by wrapping it twice around that bottom wire. And we need to reduce to 2 bottom wires, so we're going to get rid of the working wire just by cutting it very close against that twisted wire below. And if you have a little tail here sticking out, you can use some pliers to push it down. All right, now we're going to clip that top wire just as we normally would, but we need to pay attention to what side we're flipping it down onto. We want it to be on the same side as the exposed top wires. So we're going to flip it down to meet up with those exposed top wires. Now we're going to finish off our bottom wire. I like to twist these wires together down just a little bit, but you want to make sure that you twist them nice and smoothly and not with any lumps. And you can do that just by opening the wires at about the same angle away from the twisted wire, and then applying even pressure as you twist. You don't need to twist down all the way, just a little bit, and then open the loop off to the side. All right, so what we've got here is, this is the front of the piece where we're looking at the bottom wire that just is beads, and the top wire is exposed. We've got these little wraps showing on the back, and this is going to be the front side, and then the back side will look like this. The back side has our bottom wires exposed and not our top wires. Now basically what this does, when we assemble our flower, we're going to be pressing these bottom wires against the flower stem, and that will conceal them so that when we look at the back of our flower, we'll only see the beads there, and these little exposed wires will be against the stem where we can't see them. However, we're also going to be bending this back right here. And because our top wires are on the opposite side, they're going to be concealed underneath. So reverse wrapping is basically just a way to conceal your wires when both sides of a piece might be visible. All right, now before we go, I want to talk a little bit about another shading pattern that I used for these spathes. Now this one, I mentioned kind of in the intro that they start out green. These spathe pieces on the flower start out green, and then they fade to brown as they age. That means at some point in its lifetime, it's going to be both green and brown at the same time. Now you can use the same style of shading that I taught before with the regular one, the little brown one. You can use the same type of shading with pre-stringing your beads for this one. But I used 3 different colors instead of 2. Well, 2 different colors, but I mixed them together to make the third. So I've got my transparent topaz, I've got a transparent pale green, and then I mixed them together to make the third color. And then I pre-strung all 3 of these colors onto my wire, alternating the same length, a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of each color. And then I worked from the spool and it turned out like this. So that's another option there that you have for those of you who want to add a little bit of green into your spades.